So this is the Google Pixel 2. And it's one of those phones that has a lot going for it, but at the same time, it has a lot of cons to sort of coincide with that. And of course, this being a later than usual review, I wanted to talk about the full experience. Everything from the countless issues with the screen to the overall feel and use of the phone on an everyday basis. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the design. And the design for this year's Pixel 2 is very similar to the Pixel 1. It's still very similar in its overall characteristic look. The only real con that I've experienced with this design is the plastic coating on the metal on the back of the phone. It overall makes a very expensive phone feel slightly cheaper than most. Now, of course, this coating is supposed to protect the metal from everyday usage, but personally, I love the feel of metal, and this just makes it feel slightly less expensive. But on the whole, it looks like the Google Pixel 1, just slightly more grown up. Same half metal, half glass design on the back, and you still have that great placement of the fingerprint sensor right smack in the middle of the phone. But moving on to the whole daily experience with this device, it feels slightly vanilla. Nothing crazy special, it just feels like a phone. And that may be great for some, but personally it feels a little bit lackluster at times. And of course, this phone is running stock Android, or at least as close as you can get. And performance has been super snappy, super smooth, and the overall look of the Pixel launcher on this device is pretty clean. But for your average consumer, this definitely feels like a very bare bones device. It does the basics fairly well, and that's it. But now let's talk about the single greatest feature about this phone, and that of course is the camera. Now by no means was the Pixel 1 a slouch when it came to the overall image quality, but with this phone it definitely capitalizes on those pros and makes it a whole lot better. Now, of course, you have great color, great contrast, and the overall image quality is very clear and sharp with wonderful dynamic range. But I think the coolest thing about this camera, or actually cameras, is the fact that you now have portrait mode with one lens. Now, this works for both the front-facing and rear-facing cameras, and it works really well. Now, this is definitely one of those things that makes you question companies that are using two cameras and a bunch of facial recognition features, when basically it's pulling off the same effect, if not better, with one camera purely using software. This is especially impressive with the front-facing camera, even though it tends to over-sharpen the overall image, which I wish you could turn down in post, but it isn't the end of the world. But on the whole, the experience with the cameras on the Pixel 2 are pretty incredible and honestly unparalleled. Next up, I want to talk about some of the other cool features that make up the whole experience with this phone. The first is the ability to squeeze for the Google Assistant. And this is by no means a feature that is absolutely needed, but it is nice to have. And the same thing sort of goes for the front-facing speakers. By no means are they the clearest sounding speakers in the world. Personally, I still think that the iPhone has it beat out, but it is nice that they're front-facing, so it's more immersive when you're playing games or watching videos. Plus, the phone is now waterproof, and they got rid of the headphone jack. That isn't necessarily a pro, but it is something to think about. Now, this brings me to the sort of unfortunate part of the Pixel 2, and that, of course, is the display. And I know there's blue shift, and there's screen burn-in, and there's all of these other issues with the display, but the pure simple fact is, it's just not a very good-looking screen. Honestly, if you're watching videos or you're playing games or you're really doing anything with your device, you're gonna sort of be disappointed or let down even from the Pixel 1, which personally I thought had a really good screen going for it. I think the real letdown for me is the fact that the Pixel 2 standard uses Samsung screens, whereas the bigger, more expensive brother uses unproven technology from LG. And I get it, there's more than what meets the eye when it comes to the negotiations to build technology, but the fact is, this is in the hands of consumers, and it really shouldn't be. But at the end of the day, this is sort of what is the deal breaker for this phone, in my opinion. When it comes to the regular Pixel 2, the smaller brother, you have those big bezels, and it's not exactly the full 2017, 2018 experience that you'd come to expect from modern technology. But when you get this, on the other hand, I would sort of yearn for the lesser Pixel 2 in comparison. But this all leads me to the greater overall picture, which is the fact that this phone is just okay. It's not great, it's not phenomenal, it's just okay. And in the hands of your average consumer, it's fine. It's fine for them to use on a daily basis, but when you're putting this much money down for a flagship device, a Pixel, it's the king of Android, you would expect more. How's that?
I like it.